Hello, this is KCC and welcome to the Merdeka broadcast from Hooty.com. Very pleased to be here with you. My name is KC and I'm here to talk about alternative investment. I'm sure you have seen a number of other programs that have been very useful. Now, this is a topic that I'm very passionate about, and I want to talk to you about alternative investments and what are the opportunities on alternative investments. Okay, what are alternative investments? Alternative investments are assets that are not conventional investment types, such as stocks, bonds, and cash. For example, you have alternative investments that categorize like private equity, hedge funds, managed futures, real estate, commodities, and many others. And it's interesting that even real estate is categorized as an alternative investment. However, in different parts of the world, different things are popular as alternative investments. And today I want to highlight two which are of particular interest to you and is what I regarded as one of the hottest investment opportunity in this region. I'm going to talk about two. One is called pre-IPO and the other one is cryptocurrency. Now, first of all, what is pre-IPO investments? IPO stands for initial public offerings. Pre-IPO are basically the ability to put money into stocks and shares that are about to get listed. This is the stage before the listing. Now, how does this come about? Typically, in any listing of a company, there will be a period before the shares of the company get listed that are generally offered and generally at a discounted price in comparison to the listed price. And however, this alternative investment are not generally available to the public. It's generally available to accredited investors, which means investors that can prove that they have $1 million in the bank and that they are what I call sophisticated investors. It's also provided for institutions and so forth. However, if you have an opportunity to get your hands on pre-IPO shares, it's obvious that you are getting it at a price below the listed price. Now, I learned from my mentor and Sifu, his name is Robert Kiyosaki, and he said something interesting. He said, money is made when you buy and not when you sell. Now, that was interesting. When I learned that, I was a bit puzzled because I couldn't understand. I thought people would make money by selling high and buying low. So he said, money is made when you buy, not when you sell. And then I realized later on that what he meant was, if you buy what the masses buy, you would buy at a normal price, at the market price, and then you will have to go and find a way to sell it at a higher price. But if you are one of those privileged few and you're not in the masses, and if you can buy lower than the low, so you already make money when you bought, because the masses have to buy at a price higher than you do. So the ability to be in a minority few and have access to privileged investment is one of the key to successful investment. Now, pre-IPO, I like to believe, is one of those categories that you may or may not be entitled to put your hands onto. Now, how does the pre-IPO investment comes about? Well, it comes about from the alternative investment market. Now, let me tell a little bit about the alternative investment market. The alternative investment market is created in 1904 in the United States and is generally known as the US OTC. It's regulated by the US Securities and Exchange Commission, and it provides a securitization platform for small and medium-sized companies to fundraise. It's viewed as a stepping stone to uplift to either NASDAQ or New York Stock Exchange. Now, there's nothing really exciting about it until 2012, where the former American President Barack Obama approved a new law called the Jobs Act. It stands for Jumpstart Our Business Startup, that aims to assist emerging growth companies to be exempted from some of the very constraining rules and regulation in the listing regulation. So the Securities in US went through some changes with this new law, too many to describe, but I will highlight on one thing, and that is it allows non-accredited fundraise before IPO. Now this new law allows us who are not what I call sophisticated investor, who are not accredited investor, to participate in pre-IPO where previously is not available to us. Now here's a excerpt, a cutting from the Forbes magazine, and you read the headline. It tells you that Regulation A+, now everyone can invest in your startup. So two things need to be highlighted. The first word is everyone, and the second word is startup, which give rise to two realization. And there's number one, this pre-IPO state is available to everyone and not only to accredited investors. And the other thing that you may be curious about is that even startup company can be listed in the US. All right, so the US OTC market became very, very exciting place for those of us looking for investments opportunity. Now, there are 185 Hong Kong companies that are already in US OTC, 139 Singapore companies, 53 Malaysian companies, and then many others. Now, if you look at the companies in OTC, you will find that they are very well-known names. Even Carrefour, Canon, L'Oreal, Panasonic, Nokia, Sony, Nikon, HSBC, Fujitsu, Adidas, all have a counter in the OTC market. Now, is this only happening in the US? No. Other countries are also beginning to look at what we call the startup IPO market. Indonesia actually made an announcement as far back as 2016. And also Thailand has announced that they intend to launch a startup market in the same year. And Hong Kong is still at the stage of studying what they call pre-profit companies to allow them for listing. Of course, and also in Malaysia, announced something called the lead market, which allow no profit companies with no profit track record and operating history to be listed. Some difference though, in some countries, they still restrict it to accredited investors. But in the US, as I mentioned earlier, it is open to anybody and everybody. So in the US market, OTC market, a company can be listed on one of the three levels they have, either OTC Pink, or QB, or QX. The difference with these three levels is the regulation and the compliance requirement become more stringent as a company uplift from Pink to QB to QX. And generally what happens is when a company goes up to OTC, especially companies which we are consulting for, we actually put NASDAQ or New York Stock Exchange as the end goal. In other words, the OTC is regarded as what we call a transition point from which they will uplift to either NASDAQ or OTC or New York Stock Exchange. And NASDAQ and OTC are regulated by the same regulators, which is the US SEC and FINRA. And what has happened now is the US OTC market has grown tremendously, especially in transactions. In October 2017, the daily transaction for the US OTC is 700 million per day, but by March 2018, it has surpasses 1.3 billion US per day. Now, why is this important? As a stock investor, you realize that when you have shares listed in an exchange which is highly traded, with high volume, with high transaction, share price are more likely to be healthier comparatively to an exchange where transactions are very few. Now, if you look at this chart, you will notice that US OTC has a higher daily trading volume compared with London AIM board or Australia or Hong Kong GEM board or even Singapore or Malaysia for that matter, many times over. And even if you compare it with the main board, and US OTC obviously is not the main board, it's even higher than Singapore, Malaysia, right? And so this is to indicate to you the possibilities and opportunity in this area. Now, the idea of going into OTC market for some of the companies that we work with is ultimately to end up in NASDAQ. which some people might thought is difficult, but actually it's not. For a company to go into NASDAQ, one of the stream of opportunity, one of the stream by which they can use is to secure 750,000 US dollar profits over 2 years out of 3 years, which is not too bad. The only requirement that may be a bit challenging is you need 300 shareholders, and that would be possible if the company goes through the OTC market. And of course, the idea is also that you must have a bid price of $4 US. So how do we help our members get into this pre-IPO? Because we're in the business of listing company, typically there is a stage before the listing that blocks of shares are given by our clients to be made available to some of our private investors and our members. So typically, if you have a listing at, let's say, 50 cents, you could get your pre-IPO price at possibly 10 cents. Right? And you will straight away realize that there is a very good idea that if you can get a listed company shares before the listing at 10 cents, and it's going to go up to potentially listing at 50 cents. And after listing, who knows, share might go up or might go down. Here's a chart to show you the possible timeline as an example. Take typically 9 months for a company to be listed in the OTC. And typically our client will wait for about 1.5 or 2.5 years before they go to NASDAQ. So a share price that you go in pre-IPO at 10 cents could be listed in OTC at 50 cents. And by the time they go to NASDAQ, the price needs to be at least $4 US. So to differentiate, let you know that this is not normal crowdfunding. The shares you get are securitized, and when you come in as a pre-IPO investor, your details and your name, actually not details, will be listed in the official SEC website, which means that it is very transparent, and you know for sure that in the government website your name is there. That means you will be the official owner of these stocks. Now you can sell a share anytime during the 1-year period, but you can only trade the shares on the exchange after a 1-year moratorium. So comparing the difference between pre-IPO and equity crowdfunding, in equity crowdfunding you are typically looking at an unlisted company share, and you're probably buying it at a PE ratio of a certain number. And of course it's regulated by your local security exchange or whichever governing body your country has. In pre-IPO, particularly in US, I'm referring to, these are listed company share, it's liquid, one is listed, and you typically buy at a much discounted rate in comparison to the listed price. And as mentioned, this is regulated by the US Security and Exchange Commission. All right, so here's an example of some of the investors and the shares they hold in certain companies. And our organization has been listing companies in the last 2.5 years, mostly technology company covering things like artificial intelligence, things like robotics, technology, and so forth. So that's the information on pre-IPO, and if you have an interest, I will be more than pleased to share more information with you. The second area I'll go quickly into is cryptocurrency, which I'm sure some of you would have came across. The only issue is there's a lot of confusion in the market, and perhaps what I want to do here is to clarify for you and give you a little bit more information. As you know, the first cryptocurrency is started by an anonymous person called Satoshi Nakamoto, which created the concept of a technology called blockchain, which I will not attempt to explain to you here. But people like Richard Branson have said the use of blockchain could create a real economic revolution. Bill Gates say in the future, financial transaction will be eventually digital, universal, and almost free. Now, what has happened is how money has changed. Now, we previously went from barter trade to commodities such as metal as a form of value, and of course it's replaced by paper currency, which are backed by gold or silver in the reserves, which is of course no longer true, as you would know by now. So countries print cash or currency as often as they want and as they need. Today we don't use just paper currency for transactional value. Most of you use credit card, so you would not realize that money has become electronic. In countries like China, for example, they use WeChat Pay, and even if you go to the market to buy vegetables, you use your phone to pay for your transaction. So money has changed and transformed from commodity to government link to electronic means, and of course right now the coming of what we call cryptocurrency. Now blockchain has changed the future of transaction forever. This is regarded as one of the biggest IT inventions of our time. And many countries has already looked into using blockchain for both their administration, such as Dubai, and Indian government intend to use blockchain as the means to abolish cash. And banks are already developing their own blockchain technology. Now, Bitcoin is the starting point. It is really something that changed the nature of money and has went through very exciting times. And I ask people this: if you take $100 and give it to a friend who tried to explain Bitcoin to you in August 2010, and let's say you are very confused, but nevertheless you give him $100 and he say, okay, I'll put it in Bitcoin, August 2010. What would that $100 become by July 2018? Now I would like you to take a guess. Just throw a figure, just think of a figure. This will be interesting because I want you to think of a figure as large as you want, as small as you want, whatever. Well, what would that figure be? And I'll tell you right now that if you have put $100 worth of $100 into Bitcoin in August 2010, it would be 12,008,000, I can't say it, let me just give it to you the figure, 12.826534 million by July 2018. So Bitcoin has changed a lot of people's life. You know, there's a story about a guy who bought $27 worth of Bitcoin, forgot about it, and woke up one day and found it's worth $886,000. Decided to change it and bought a house. But today, if he didn't do that, that $27 worth of Bitcoin would be worth 44 million. I'm sure he's crying every day, right? So things are happening very fast. The whole cryptocurrency market has went from 37.8 billion in January 2017 to 286 billion by July 2018. So obviously this is something as an investor that you need to look at. Of course it gets very complicated, and the question is, what do we put our money into? Now I tell people this: you take 1% and only 1% of your net asset and put it into cryptocurrency. Why 1%? Well, if the 1% becomes nothing, you lose the money, I don't think it will affect you very much financially. But that 1% could be that $100 that I talked about in August 2010. That $100 became 12.8 million 8 years later. Now, it will not be the same, probably not in 8 years, probably less, and may not be the same magnitude. But the writing is in the wall. Cryptocurrency is definitely something you should look into. Now you look at this chart, which shows some of the major cryptocurrency in March 2017. By July, it doesn't matter what you put your money into, every one of them went up, right? So, what should we do? I'm not suggesting that you purchase or go into Bitcoin. One of my primary reasons why I suggest that is Bitcoin is a 10-year-old technology. Although many people have made millions out of it, and Bitcoin will remain as one of the exciting options. But both Bill Gates and Branson have something to say. Bill Gates say, we need things that draw on the revolution of Bitcoin, but Bitcoin alone is not good enough. And Richard Branson say, Bitcoin may not be the perfect currency of the future, but it's the pioneer of global currency, and there'll be other currencies like it that may be even better. So Bitcoin has limitation. Very slow transaction, can go up to as fast as maybe 20 minutes to do a transaction. It could be take as long as 2 hours, and therefore it is not likely going to be something that will be used in retail. And so it's only accepted by 250,000 merchants, which is still good. It's probably the only cryptocurrency accepted by retail. And the other part is there's no KYC. It's anonymous. And because there's no KYC, which means that there's no identity of the sender and receiver, it's not going to comply with emerging regulations, and government are not likely to recognize it. But then that's the reason why they have such currency, because they don't want to be within the government regulation. However, perhaps there are opportunities if you can find a currency that are conforming to regulations, right? Now, the other thing I have concern about Bitcoin is 47 individuals hold 29% for the Bitcoin in the world. And also the other thing to realize is this: the first is not always one to last. In technology, Yahoo was first in the search engine, but Google took over. MySpace is the first in social network, but Facebook took over. Nokia is the first smartphone, but Apple took over. So the first is not always the last. So the question is, who will be the next after Bitcoin? Now, my student asked me where they should put their 1% of their net asset into. I don't have a direct answer for that, but I'd like to give you some suggestions on criteria for cryptocurrency. Number one, you should choose a cryptocurrency that has liquidity, meaning that you can exchange the currency for fiat currency and for other currency easily. So it needs to be an exchange that you can change that currency, otherwise you're going to get stuck with it. The second thing is utility. After all, what is money for? What is currency for? It's for transaction. So the question you should ask is, if you're going to put money into any cryptocurrency, the question you should ask is, am I able to use the currency to buy things? Am I going to be able to use it to provide services for myself? Now, perhaps the only cryptocurrency right now that can do that is Bitcoin, but it's still very limited to 250,000 merchants worldwide. And most of it is not retail, most of them are online merchants. The other one is security, and this is a very big concern. There's so many stories of people holding cryptocurrency, they have their wallet get hacked. So you need to make sure that whichever currency you go into accompanies it with some security function, which will make sure that hacking is going to be something reduced. And finally, you want to go into a cryptocurrency that will provide appreciation. But how does the currency appreciate? Well, it's a supply and demand factor. And how do we get appreciation? Appreciation happens when demand is bigger than supply. So it's very important to find a currency that has limited supply and has high demand, meaning that the currency must be global, in my opinion. It must be used by a lot of people worldwide. It cannot be confined to a small region or one country. It's going to be very limited in terms of appreciation possibility. So you have to have lots of people holding the currency and demanding the currency in order for the value to go up. I have one last thing to say. That's my personal prediction. I believe that utility is the key. And I want to suggest that the cryptocurrency is the first to be accepted by Visa card or MasterCard will be the winner. Meaning that if a cryptocurrency can be used in any merchant that accept Visa card and MasterCard, that means 65 million merchants worldwide. Wow, that cryptocurrency will be the winner. Now, I want to end by suggesting that you may want more information on both pre-IPO and on cryptocurrency. I'm providing you with a QR code, or if you can't use a QR code, there's a link for you that you can go into to get more information and also some articles that I have on this area. Thank you very much for being me, and I'm sure you get some very quick information here that will be useful for you.